The Prime Minister condemned Facebook today. Not that that'll cut much ice with the social network's users, but it does point up an interesting moral question. Facebook has decided to allow people to post videos of other people being beheaded. Why anyone would want to do so, or indeed to watch, is a mystery. Broadcasters in this country don't allow such things to be broadcast, yet children and young people often seem to be spending more time on Facebook than watching any broadcast channel, and it doesn't bother the billionaires in California one jot. David Grossman reports.
For today's news-based quiz question, please say which of the following you find most offensive. Someone rolling a joint, someone's naked breasts not engaged in the act of breastfeeding, someone taking the air as nature intended, or a video of someone being decapitated.
For many, the answer is so obvious as to render the question itself absurd, which is why the decision of Facebook to allow again the posting of videos depicting beheadings is, at least to the Prime Minister, bizarre.
Today he tweeted, "It's irresponsible of Facebook to post beheading videos, especially without a warning. They must explain their actions to worried parents." The Home Office Minister, James Brokenshire, says Facebook needs a rethink.
Well, I think many parents across the country will be deeply disturbed and shocked by this sudden decision of Facebook to allow these grossly offensive videos back onto their website. They clearly recognised that there was a serious problem when they decided that this material needed to be taken down earlier this year. And it's strange that they've now sought to put this back on without any clarity as to the protections afforded to children and giving parents that assurance that these issues will be dealt with properly.
The Prime Minister copped a bit of ridicule for his tweet about Facebook posting videos when, of course, Facebook is a platform. It's the users who post videos.
But even so, the question is, why allow such appalling content back onto the site?
In a statement, the company said Facebook has long been a place where people turn to share their experiences, particularly when they're connected to controversial events on the ground, such as human rights abuses, acts of terrorism and other violent events. People, the company went on, are sharing this video on Facebook to condemn it. If the video were being celebrated or the actions in it encouraged, our approach would be different.
The company is determined to preserve Facebook's capacity to harness international outrage, to be a medium for social change, to spread news of human rights violations right around the world.
As an example of this social action, here's the 2012 campaign to publicise the war crimes of the Ugandan guerrilla leader Joseph Kony. Anti-censorship campaigners say context is everything.
I do have a lot of sympathy with Facebook on this. It's a huge platform and which is used for a lot of different purposes, you know, from sharing pictures of family to, as Facebook say, you know, discussing news events, discussing politics and so on. And I think they want to have a platform that's as open as possible and allows people to use it in a variety of ways. Now, these videos are no doubt horrendous, but if people do want to talk about the brutality of war, the brutality of terror, then I think they should be allowed to view these things.
This afternoon, as a result of the pressure they've been under, Facebook began posting warnings alongside the videos.
As we know, children are really inquisitive, and the likelihood is they probably will still open those sites and go and have a look. What I'd like to see really is more discussion with Facebook, which we are having, about whether it is feasible to perhaps have different settings for different ages on Facebook. That's something I'm sure that they will be looking at. However, I think we do need to be aware, of course, all this information is available elsewhere on the internet as well. This is not just a Facebook issue. But yes, predominantly I think Facebook do have a responsibility to their young users. And we just need to be mindful that, you know, significant harm could come to them if they do see this content.
With over 1 billion users, Facebook could never please everyone. What is offensive? What should be allowed? Indeed, how much responsibility the company itself has for what its users choose to post? Well, these are all questions that they and we are still grappling with.
Well, with us now is Hayden Hewitt, who co-founded the website LiveLeak, where you can see a very large number of videos of that kind if you wish to. Also with us is Colin Freeman, the Sunday Telegraph's chief foreign correspondent, who spent 5 weeks being held as a hostage in Somalia in 2008. Just to be clear, are there any types of violence that you wouldn't show on your site?
We tend not to allow multiples of any one kind of thing, so there aren't actually a huge amount of exactly that type of media on the site. There are some, but there are certain things we won't and can't show.
Why do you allow them?
It falls within a certain sense of freedom. There's always an extreme. With any kind of freedom, there's an extreme. And some adults wish to see it for whatever reason. You know, it's not always prurient, as people claim. You know, it's a general human condition. We look at the extreme, the horrific. Some people choose to. If they wish to, they can view them. If they don't.
Now, what's your perspective on this after your experience?
Well, luckily I didn't end up in a beheading video. People who took me weren't that kind of people, but many people have done. And their relatives, unlike them, are still alive, and the prospect of these videos being punted around, you know, is not pleasant for them, to say the least. I spoke to someone earlier this evening before I came on, who's one of whose relatives died in a video that was leaked onto the internet. I say leaked, put on there deliberately, and he says it's horrific, the idea that these things are around, and he has to worry about his young kids and other relatives, young relatives in his extended family finding these things on the internet.
What do you think when you hear that sort of testimony?
Well, of course, it's absolutely horrific. For any family who could deny that, it would be ridiculous to. But we see things on the news every day where people die, perhaps in a less immediate or graphic manner. We're showing the planes smashing into the buildings time after time. There's families out there hurt by this all the time.
But you don't see beheadings on television because it's regulated.
Yeah, because there's a limit what television allows. Death's okay as long as it's perhaps a little more impersonal, a little less graphic. And that's understandable. I mean, I'm an advocate for responsible titling, for information, for trying to ensure, you know, people know what they're going to see. But when it comes to, when he said children viewing and things of that nature, there needs to be some education for the parents there as well.
But Facebook is a medium that's in virtually every home now, isn't it? It's as ubiquitous as television.
I do not advocate the posting of graphic material on Facebook on a site that's aimed at teenagers and younger people. I most assuredly do not support graphic media on Facebook. It's their choice, but it's not something I'd want to see on my feed.
What's your reading of the Facebook position?
Well, I would agree with him in the sense that it's not the appropriate forum. It normalises this kind of thing to some extent and says this is normal to see this kind of thing. And also, just more generally, if you have this sort of stuff out there, there is, you know, the impact that it has on someone who's lost a loved one. They're trying to make a psychological recovery from a horrific ordeal, and this stuff is out there, potentially reminding them all the time of what happened. You know, it's...
But as a journalist, you presumably believe in disclosure, don't you?
Well, yes, but journalists have been writing about beheadings and killings and all sorts of dreadful things for, you know, hundreds of years, and we didn't not write about it just because we didn't see the material. It's possible to have a debate about torture, terrorism, these things, without actually having to see the acts being carried out.
I suppose you might be able to make a case that in some circumstances, for example, the killing of Saddam Hussein or Colonel Gaddafi, there's a cathartic effect from seeing these things actually happen.
That's quite possible, and we also saw in Egypt, one of the triggers for the big protests in Egypt of the Arab Spring was a video shot of a man called Khalid Said, who was beaten to death in custody, and his face was literally shaped into a kind of gargoyle kind of face, his death mask. And his family shot that video in the police station, put it online. Obviously, that had a shocking effect. The context is everything to some extent. But when you're putting a hostage video on, someone being beheaded, the only person who originally intended that video to go out is the terrorists themselves. You're doing their bidding by disseminating it. That's what they want. It causes terror amongst the people who've seen it, and terror amongst anyone else that is directed.
What do you make of that?
The actual effect of those videos.
I'm not saying that so much.
No, I mean in terms of
the man who's being beheaded clearly has no desire to see the video posted anywhere.
But the horrible irony, in no way humorous, is that the releasing of these videos, because remember, we only seem to care in the West, in truth, when they're killing Westerners. It was the release of those videos and the reaction to them, which is why they pretty much stopped from that region of the world. It was totally counterproductive to them. I'm not saying it's a good thing people were beheaded, but it was a counterproductive act on their part. It worked against what they wanted to achieve anyway.
There's some truth in that, but it didn't stop them happening. And, you know, one or two Al-Qaeda groups may have said that didn't work, but it hasn't stopped that kind of stuff going on.
We certainly don't see anything like it was 2005, 2007.
OK, thank you both very much indeed. Well, now the sports news. There's a spring in the step of football fans in Afghanistan. The Prime Minister condemned Facebook today. Not that that'll cut much ice with the social network's users, but it does point up an interesting moral question. Facebook has decided to allow people to post videos of other people being beheaded. Why? Bothered the billionaires in California one jot. David Grossman reports.
For today's news-based quiz question, please say which of the following you find most offensive. Someone rolling a joint, someone's naked breasts not.
Which is why the decision of Facebook to allow again the posting of videos depicting beheadings is, at least to the Prime Minister, bizarre.
Today he tweeted, "It's irresponsible of Facebook to post beheading videos, especially without a warning. They must..."
Anyone would want to do so, or indeed to watch, is a mystery. Broadcasters in this country don't allow such things to be broadcast, yet children and young people often seem to be spending more time on Facebook than watching any broadcast channel, and it doesn't...
Engaged in the act of breastfeeding, someone taking the air as nature intended, or a video of someone being decapitated.
For many, the answer is so obvious as to render the question itself absurd.